My name is Guy Hatcher, and some of you guys I do know. My family, we used to go to Irving Bible for years, and we live literally right around the corner from here. So it was real easy for me this morning. It's about a 2-minute drive to get here. But today I do want to talk to you about something that I found very impactful in my life called purpose, passion, and impact. Now, as a financial planner, I've been very fortunate over the last 25 years to work with a lot of very influential individuals, business owners, and then different families. And what I started noticing through all this time frame is there is a real defined, really purpose statement that most of these families utilize, or most of these individuals utilize. So it's what I call a success track. So what I've started realizing as in how to define is I broke it down in those 3 words. Very successful entrepreneurs have a very high purpose, they attach a very high passion to it, and they're very defined in what they want their impact to be. Now, when you talk about purpose, we can talk about it from 2 different perspectives. We can talk about it from the world's perspective. How does the world define purpose? And then we can talk about it from God's perspective. How does God define purpose? But what I really realized is that most of these individuals that are highly driven, that they have certain what I call triggers that are really driving them to that real high level of purpose. Now, what do we mean by a trigger? Well, normally what I've found, triggers are normally fears. In other words, there is something in their childhood, something in their life experiences is driving them to this high level of purpose. Let me give you a great example. I'm presently working with an individual right now I'm doing a coaching program with. He's about a $100 million guy. He's my age, 53, highly successful. Lives a few miles from here, high-octane guy, competitive in everything that you do with him. In fact, if we had him in a board meeting right now, maybe 30, 40 minutes in the board meeting, he can be very intense, one-on-one, going through multiple different locations and projects and cost and analysis and all that, and all of a sudden he goes down and he'll start doing 50 push-ups. And his staff has told me this as I've gone through, which really intrigues me, but that's his intensity that he brings to the table. Loves the Lord, great believer. But now when you start unwinding what drives his purpose, what's real interesting is really at age 9 he became the parent of his family. 2 alcoholic parents. You know, mom dies, dad dies. Basically he's taking care of all the siblings at age 16. So this individual has a lot of fears in his past that drive him to have the high success level today. I've got other individual I went to the basketball game with the other night. 36 years old, great believer, loves the Lord. Started visiting with him about this exact subject. And what was real interesting is he has triggers. When he was 19, he was dating a beautiful gal, and the new possible mother-in-law says, "You will never have enough money for my daughter. You can never be successful enough for my daughter." Goes to Texas A&M, high drive, marries another gal, owns a couple of companies, phenomenal guy, loves the Lord. But when I brought up triggers, he says, "I get that. I understand that." Now let me take you to my personal situation. When I was 13, I actually came down with spinal meningitis. I was raised in a little town called Gainesville, Texas, right north of here. Never forget it, 1973, I was in PE that day and I had about 102-degree temperature. Coach actually said, "Hatcher, you look ashen while I go to the nurse." I go to the nurse, 102-degree temperature. Nurse says, "Guy, we'll call your mom." Now, believe it or not, it's kind of funny. They go ahead and send me up to English class, and with 102-degree temperature. And so I remember walking into English class, walk into a room very similar to this. Teacher's desk is right here. Second chair back, 3 rows over. I can still see this room. Got the little bitty and the little stud in 8th grade sitting right next to me. Bell hadn't rung yet. Intercom's right above me, one of those old intercoms. And someone comes over the intercom and says, "Guy, your mom is here, come on down." I get up. Now I'm a lanky, I go from 5'2" to 5'10" my 8th grade year. So I really blow up a lot that year. I'm raised blue collar. I've got a paper route. And so, I'm having to pay for my own clothes. I was raised with high integrity, high work ethic, all that kind of stuff. So work was never an issue for me. So as I'm walking out the door, the two little special people start making fun of me. They start belittling who I am. They start belittling what I have on. Guys, to this day, I can remember exactly what I said as I went across that threshold. I said, someday you will not make fun of me. Just like that, that seed got planted. That trigger got set. And for my whole life, I've been driven on making money. I've been driven on what I wear. I've been driven on where I live. I've been driven on what my wife wears. My whole life I've dealt with that issue. Now, I've had other triggers in my life that followed after that. I was married at 20. Married a young gal out of South Texas. She came from a lot of money. I did not. So we instantly bought into this dysfunction. I had to work my bottom off to make sure I gave her what she deserved. So we went into this high dysfunctional relationship. So through my whole 20s, I continued to add to those triggers. I had several different triggers that got set. Went through a bankruptcy at 27. Went through a divorce at 30. So from the time I was 13, by the time I was 30, a lot of triggers got set. The problem with triggers are, if they're fear-based, which most of them are going to be fear-based, what it's basically doing, it's making me run away from something versus run to something. And I'm going to tell you, most successful individuals are running from something versus running to something. And we'll come back and talk about how do you run to something, but those are just a couple of examples of what I call triggers. Now, I did this talk about 3 months ago, and I had 60 people in the room. Lord laid it on my heart. Didn't know really how it was going to go, and by the time I got into it, I had half the room crying because it created a lot of emotion. From that conversation, what I've done is I went and created a very simple tool that I want to run you through. And I'm going to encourage you to take this home, and I'm going to encourage you to start dealing with what your triggers are. Because if triggers are based upon fear, as a believer, are we supposed to live within fear? No. In fact, there is a way to be positively motivated, because we're talking about purpose now. Now, here's the problem. I want to make sure I get this across. That if you have very high purpose in your life and you attach a high level of passion to that, if it is the wrong purpose, guys, you're going to get to the wrong destination faster. That's the problem with it. Okay, now, there was a lot of passion that probably went on in the gym last night, because I've been in that gym a few nights. And you understand, you get with a jock, you understand that high passion. It's the same thing with a high entrepreneur. Now, I want to talk to you, before I go through this, I want to talk to you about mountaintops for a second. What I've also noticed, I've got a Bible study I'm part of right now on Monday mornings. We have 12 guys in the room. And my pastor and I, we started it, all high-octane guys. I mean, very successful business owners. Got a $50 million guy, a $100 million guy. And the reason I tell you this, high successful individuals. Here's what I'm starting to notice about individuals like that. They're isolated, highly isolated. Because once you get to a level, it's what I call the White House syndrome. Once you get to the big White House, whatever that house is, you actually become more isolated. Because the average Joe says, I can't socialize with him because he's at a different level. I'm going to challenge you right now. If you run across any individuals in your life, or you are one of those individuals, start reaching out to those guys. They need it more than the average Joe needs it. They have nobody that will really talk to them. And it's really sad, but you can create a whole new ministry, and that's what we're basically trying to do, is reach out to these guys. But what I've learned dealing with these guys in the last year in this Bible study is, and we talked about this, and every guy's doing this, he says, I get that. Most entrepreneurs, they're so driven, they're running towards a mountaintop. I've run a lot of mountaintops. Here's the problem when you go mountaintops. If you live from mountaintop to mountaintop because you don't want the valley. A driver, once you get to the mountaintop, here's the things that I've found. Normally you're there by yourself. And the reason you're normally there by yourself is you've already driven your family into the dirt. They're saying, I'm not running up that hill. You got your best buddy said, I can't stay up with you. And so you normally get to the mountaintop by yourself. Now, when you're sitting on the mountaintop, here's the other thing I've learned. You don't get to stay there long. You might see a couple of initials on the rocks from the mountain climber before you and all that kind of stuff. But what happens when you get to the mountaintop? You got to go down. And you're going to go run back down, and you're going to hit the valley, and guess what you're going to do again? You're going to run again and go up to the mountaintop. You're going to continue to do these cycles until your body says, I can't do this anymore. And I know this personally. Because God makes us uniquely physically. He makes you unique. He makes us all uniquely spiritually, emotionally, and also relationally. Okay, and the problem is you're going to burn one or all four of those out as you continue to run mountaintops. So what I'm trying to figure out in my life, and I feel like the Lord's helping me with this, is how can I have better balance? How can I take those four key areas of my life, and how can I learn to have better balance in all four areas? And it's tough, because what the world is screaming out, guys, is the world is screaming out, go to the mountaintop. Go to the mountaintop. Because in the mountaintop experience is what? You're the best. In the mountaintop experience is what? You're affirmed. In the mountaintop experience is you're the stud. But what I'm starting to find out, that's a lie direct from Satan. So let me walk you through the tool. What I've done right here is what I would have you circle on the timeline here what your current age is. Put a mark there. I just did 0 to 80. You know, normally most guys I'm going to have this conversation with before then. So put a mark on the sheet there, wherever you are age-wise. Now what I want you to think of is anything from the line up is going to be any positive experiences you've had in your life. Now what I'm talking about is monumental experiences. Okay, I'm an Eagle Scout. I can remember the day I got my Eagle Scout. I can remember the day that I got married. I can remember the day both of my girls were born. I can remember the day that, that I became very successful in my business, when I bought my first big house. I remember the day I accepted the Lord. I remember the day that I started having impact and mentoring in other people's lives. So I'm trying to give you some positive ideas. Okay, now what I would do is on the back, I've got a list here. I'd list all your positive out on the back, on the left-hand side there. You might end up with 8, 10, 12, 15, start listing them out. Once you do that, identify your top 5 and bring them around to the front, here at the bottom, okay? Now, at the same time, when you deal with positive experiences, we all have negative experiences. So we're going to take the line below that, anything below the line there, and we're going to start charting those out. At 8, this happened. At 13, I had spinal meningitis. At 27, I went through a bankruptcy. At 30, I went through a divorce. And I start listing out those negative experiences. And all I want you to do is, I want you to literally, as a graph, I want you to actually draw a line from your positive experience. If you had one at 9, a positive experience, and you had a negative at 13, I want you to start grafting that. And you're going to start seeing you probably never stay above the line. In other words, we don't always live a positive life through our experiences in our relationships. Guys, I probably sat down with over 10,000 families in my career doing some form of estate planning or financial planning. I can take each and every family, and there's pain in those families. And in fact, let's say mom and dad just passed away. Most families are going to have issues. If you put a bag of cash on the table, they're going to fight over the bag of cash. If you put a piece of artwork on the table, they're going to fight over a piece of artwork. Nearly every family does. It's not about the asset. It's about the triggers that were set years ago. Son says to daughter, Dad loved you more, that's why I deserve this. Daughter says, Mama loved you more, this is why I deserve this. So what happens is, because of the lack of the blessing and the affirmation in their lives, they're actually trying to deal with that emotion through assets. Those are what I call negative triggers. So once again, relationships and experiences is what shapes those triggers. So what I'm trying to help you figure out is, what triggers do you have? So you're going to do the same thing on the back with your negative. List out all your negative that you can come up with. And once again, monumental. And then you're going to bring your top 5 here. I'm going to tell you, I've run several people through this in the last 4 months. Phenomenal tool, because what the Lord can do through you is help you to deal with some emotion and start helping you to heal some of the things that have really been, that needed to be dealt with for years. Okay? Now, the next thing I want you to do is, based upon those positive and negative, let's talk about core beliefs. Now, when I talk about core beliefs here, this could be, what's your core belief on work ethic? I believe you got to work hard. What's your core belief on faith? What's your core belief on honesty? What's your core belief on integrity? And I want you, everybody has core beliefs they live their life out on. Now, what I've also realized, most people don't have defined values that they live their life out on. In other words, if I go to Henry and say, Henry, I know you're a man of integrity. Okay, broad statement, and I actually do know he's a man of integrity. But has Henry ever written that down? I base my life, foundationally, one of my values is high integrity. So what I've actually gone in and started listing out the values that I want to teach my children and making those foundational now in being the parent that I need to be. And I think it's very important to understand that. But I want you to deal with your core values. Now, why is that important? As you open up or go to the next page, our past is what actually affects our future. The way we live our today is really based upon what we experienced yesterday. Now, guys, get this. The problem is this. If our yesterday was based upon deceit and lies with what Satan has planted in our hearts and in our experiences and relationships, guess what? We're not living our life out today the way we should be living it out. We're living our life based upon deceit. We're living our life based upon lies. So it's real important to understand, how am I truly living my life today, and how was it shaped by the past experiences and relationships of yesterday? Okay, now I'm going to give you something I've been using for years, and it's been very effective for me, and it works very well. And by the way, I'm giving you $30,000 worth of free advice here, because I've done counseling over 18 years to learn this. So, but this tool I had a counselor teach me years ago, and it's just been very, very effective. It's called imagery. In other words, how do I image? And the way I break it down is 2 movies. So what I've done is I've done movie screen number 1 here, and I've done movie screen number 2. Movie screen number 1 is the world's definition. So let's say this afternoon I'm sitting there, and I've had a great talk with y'all. I'm kind of on a high, but I go home now. I got to do some housework. Kids are screaming, whatever the deal is, and I start getting a little blue and a little down. The old guy, about 14 years ago, the addictive side would kick in. I'm going to go to the boat show. I'm going to go to Bass Pro. I'm going to go do something, probably buy something that's going to make me feel better. Okay, I learned that about myself right around about age 40, 41, 42. Because once again, I was never affirmed as a child. I was never really encouraged as a child. So I used all of these things the world says will give you that affirmation and that encouragement. So from the world's perspective, how does the world define success? So what I've done is I listed out 4 or 5 things here. How does the world define success? How does the world, define performance? How about love? Bigger than that for a guy, how does the world, define identity? Okay, our identity is in what we do. Okay, and I've got a lot of guys that I've coached in retirement. I've got a guy who just sold his business, 51 years old. I had breakfast with this past week. Great guy, loves the Lord. In fact, he went on a ski trip with us a couple weeks ago. Sat him down, and I gave him the book Halftime. I don't know if you guys have read it, phenomenal book. So, and I'm starting to coach him. Look, God has helped you and honed you and given you the success to have impact for the second half. But what I also started coaching him on is, look, who you are is not this company. Who you are is not the success you've had all over these years. Who you are is not the amount of cash that you have in the bank. Who you are is only your identity through Christ, period. Now guys, here's the problem. As a believer, we hear it when we go to church. And if we get it here, if we acknowledge it here, okay, I believe that guy. The problem is getting it from your mind to your heart on a day-to-day basis. And guys, that's a different journey. About 4 years ago, the counselor says, Guy, you've got it up top. You need to start living it out in your heart. I didn't get that. I kept saying, okay, how can I check this off? Because I'm a check-off guy. Remember, I'm an ex-mountain climber. I love climbing mountains, or used to, because you get this wild rush when you get to the mountain. It's addictive. But what I've noticed in the last 2 years, I said, I'm not going to mountain climb anymore. And we'll go to that in a second, because what the problem is when you're living with triggers and they're negative, what are you running from? Well, when you start living out the call that God has given you in your life, what do you start running to? There's a different running from something, and there's a difference running to something. That's what I've started experiencing in the last couple of years. I'm finally starting to run to something versus run from something. Very, very important as you get into that. But what I want you to do, going back to the 2 movie screens, go in and list out, what does the world say about identity? The more toys, the more success, the bigger house, you're the guy. What does the world say about success? Tied to your 1040, tied to the way you look, tied to what you drive. What does the world say about love? It comes and goes. Okay, once you get that idea and start recognizing that, now I want you to say, I'm going to turn that TV off. I'm not going to watch that movie anymore. Then I want you to physically in your mind say, I'm going to turn on the next TV. And the next TV is, what does God say about it? What does God say about love? What does God say about identity? What does God say about success? Let me tell you how this has been very, very helpful for me. In my relationship with my wife, I've noticed that I'm more patient. I notice I'm more understanding. I notice I'm more loving because I refuse to live that life out with her through the world's perspective. In my relationship with my children, the same way. I'm more patient, I'm more understanding, I'm more encouraging, I'm more affirming. Because remember, I'm a child that didn't have affirmation. So, okay, how do I turn around and give affirmation when I didn't receive it? God had to give me that affirmation. I had to accept that affirmation and then I could pass that on. So, phenomenal tool that if you'll utilize this has been very, very helpful with me and how I live out my life. It's just 2 different perspectives. Do I want to live movie number 1 or do I want to live movie number 2? So on any given day, if I catch myself saying, no, that's from the world's perspective, I literally play like I turn the TV off and I play like I turn on a separate TV. It's been very, very effective. Okay, any questions so far? Everybody understand kind of how the tool works? And so I'm going to encourage you to go home, play with it, see how it works for you. I want to talk to you a little bit about calling. We talked a little bit about the triggers and some different stories and my story and all that kind of stuff. And once again, when you're living your calling, you're actually running to something versus running from something. Let me give you a little scripture here. This comes out of Genesis, and it's Genesis 12, 1 through 3. The Lord had said to Abraham, leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. A couple points here. What God is basically doing to Abraham is actually in Haran. He had been there with his father for years. His father had passed away. So God comes to Abraham in chapter 12, 1 through 3, and just what we read. What he basically said, he said, Abraham, go, get up, move, get in the game. At the same time, what he said was, leave where you presently are and follow me to your promised land. Follow me to the land that you can have impact in, Abraham. And that was Canaan. Now, if you continue on from chapter 12 to chapter 25, this is basically this book that I'm currently wrapping up on. I talked a little bit about last year. This is what we have based our whole foundation of the book. The book is really talking about legacy from a biblical perspective. And what I based it on was Abraham. And when I was reading it a year ago, December, the Lord really just showed me something. When you go to chapter 15:3, Abraham calls out to God, God, who am I going to leave my estate to? All I have is my chief servant. And that's when God went in and promised him, no, you're going to have a son, we're going to give you Isaac. You go all the way up to 25:5, it says, Abraham died, left everything to Isaac, but before he did, he gave special gifts to the other children and sent them to the east. Okay, now here's what's interesting with that. What I've noticed working with individuals when they come and talk to me is they say, God, help us hand our assets and get it to the next generation. It's always about the assets. Anytime anybody talks about estate planning, it's always about the assets. How can I take my house? How can I take my 401k? How can I take my cash? How can I take all this stuff and hand it off to the next generation? And guys, that's important, but here's what I've learned going through this process in the last few months. The assets are the least that God wants us to pass on. It's not about the assets. He wants us to pass on our family heritage. He wants us to actually take and He wants us to pass on a very distinct vision for our family. He wants us to take and He wants us to pass on the values, the core values that we were raised on and we live our life on, and communicate that to future generations. He wants us to honor and cherish relationships and teach our children how to have healthy relationships and pass that gift on to the next generation. And then He wants us to actually take and handle the assets. So what we've done through the book is we're walking you through a very distinct way to do all 5 of those. We're also driving you in the book to actually design and set up what I call a family life plan. About a 2 or 3 pager that literally you go in and say, here's who we are, here's who I am, here's my wife, here's if you're married, this is how we believe. So I did an opening statement. I distinctly went in and laid out, the Lord gave me last summer, and I just toned it to get it into the final edit on the book. Just a very simple plan. So not only my children's children, but 5, 6 generations from now, those guys can understand what great-great-great-granddaddy Guy believed in, stood for, and was called to do within his family. Now, why is that important? It's important because Abraham, probably better than anybody in the Bible, actually showed us how to define and leave a legacy. That's what 25:5 was showing us. If you go back into chapter 17, what was real interesting is God said, Abraham, my covenant will only go through Isaac. It's not going to go through Ishmael. Hey, I'm going to still take care of Ishmael, but it's only going to go through Isaac. So what Abraham basically did in his final day and on his deathbed, he actually dealt with the heritage. He knew all the history and the heritage had to go through Isaac. He actually dealt with the relationships. He knew there were other children here they had to be affirmed to, and he dealt with that. He dealt with the vision. He dealt with the values. And then he dealt with the stuff. Now, what was also interesting, if you go in about 25, I think it's about 7, Ishmael and Isaac buried their dad together. So here's a divided family, and we see a lot of these today in our industry, in our business, a divided family coming together in a healthy form and fashion in burying and affirming their father. Now, let me talk to you about impact in the call. I want to take you back to chapter about 13 in Genesis. What's interesting is, you remember Abraham, when he came out of Haran, he had Sarah, but he also had his nephew Lot. Okay, Lot, his father had already passed away in Haran. So Abraham says, come on Lot, you can go with us. We're going to the promised land. We're going to where God has called me. Now if you continue, what happens, if you remember, is Lot built up flocks and herdsmen just about as large as what Abraham did. Because you remember, they got to the place that the land could not hold them both. What's interesting is Abraham, being the senior, he says, Lot, you choose. Now this is really interesting to me as I've gone back and done a study on this. He let Lot choose. What did Lot choose? He looked up, he chose what I call green grass. He looked to the left, he looked to the right, and to the right was green grass, so he went to Sodom and Gomorrah. Now here's the point that I want to talk about on impact. If you can define and have the right purpose, if you can attach passion to it, I believe God calls us all to have impact in our life. Now, Guy, how do you define impact? Well, I think that can take on a different form for all of us. I think He calls us to have impact in our families. I think He calls us to have impact wherever we work or whatever company we have. I think He calls us to have impact with our friends. I think He calls us to have impact in our body, our church body, and within a community. Okay? So I don't think impact is a choice, guys. You know, and the problem is this: we're going to have impact whether we really want to or not. It just might be negative impact. So my theory is, let's have positive impact. But if you look at Abraham and Lot, Abraham had phenomenal impact in his life. Continues to have phenomenal impact. How come? Because God gave him the covenant. God blessed Abraham and said, you and your offspring will be great. You will have phenomenal land. You will be blessed phenomenally for the rest of your life. It will pass from generation to generation to generation. Now, if you don't know this, in Galatians it says if you are in Abraham, in other words, if you're a believer, you are underneath the Abrahamic covenant. We get the same covenant as what Abraham does. So here's a guy that lived out a phenomenal legacy and had high impact. But let's go back and talk about Lot for a second, because this really intrigues me. When you go on and read about Lot, he goes into Sodom and Gomorrah. Go up to about chapter 17. 3 visitors show up on Abraham's, at his place. Ends up one of them being God. They're going for a walk. He says, how can I hide this from my faithful servant? I'm going to go in and destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because it's become wicked. And remember, Lot's parked his little bottom in Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay? But here's what intrigues me about it. Abraham begs, hey, if there's one faithful person, or actually 50, 40, 10, it gets all the way down to 10, and God says, if there's 10, I won't destroy it. So, goes in, Lot gets warned. Guess how many people come out of Sodom and Gomorrah? 4. Lot, his wife, his 2 daughters. Now think this through. He had herdsmen just like Abraham did. Abraham had 318 trained soldiers. He had thousands of people that worked for him and traveled with him and lived with him. Abraham had tremendous impact. Lot had the same thing. Guys, Lot had no impact. He goes into Sodom and Gomorrah, and you would think he's got all these guys saying, I'm going to follow you wherever. He's hightailing it out because, he's trying to follow what God's saying. He's got no one that's followed him. That finally hit me. Lot had no impact in his life. So here's our choice. Do we want to have impact in our life like Abraham? Or do we want to have impact in our life like Lot? That's what I'm finally starting to realize. I want to finish with 2 stories here for you. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a gentleman by the name of Derek Redmond. He was actually the British 400 runner back in 1987, had the British record. In 1988, he goes into the Seoul Olympics. And Derek was very fast. Actually, 90 seconds before he was fixing to run his first race at the Seoul Olympics, he blows an Achilles. 8 surgeries later, he's in Barcelona. Sits down with his dad before he goes in 1992, and he's fixing to run the 400. He's in the quarterfinals. And he says, Dad, he goes through all these surgeries and everything. His dad and he are talking, and they both came down, whatever you do, finish. Just finish the race. Run, what the race that God's called you to run. Do the best you can and finish. Now, guys, I'm an ex-track guy. I remember watching in 1992. So he comes off the first 200, he's just blowing. And he's right there at the front. Looks like he's going to make it into the finals, and what happens? Hamstring pops. He goes down to his knees. The rest of the runners take off around the corner. All their eyes are pinned directly on Derek. That moment in history, one of the most powerful moments in Olympic history, he gets up and he starts hopping. And he hops all the way around on one leg. His dad's up at the top of the stadium. He starts running down. Coolest story. And you go out and you actually watch it if you want to go out and pull it up and watch it. Coolest story. His dad's running down, a policeman trying to stop him, said, you can't stop me, that's my son, and jumps over the fence and goes out. And all of a sudden, Derek feels somebody coming, tapping him on the shoulders, and he pushes him away because he's pushed everybody away because he's going to finish the race. And finally, his dad grabs his arm and says, son, it's your dad. We're going to finish this race. And his dad, 65,000 people watching in, his dad helps him all the way, but right before he gets to the finish line, He releases him so Derek can finish the race and hop across by himself. Once again, goes down in Olympic history. Here's a guy that was called to run. Here's a guy that ran. Here's a guy that nearly didn't get to finish. But whatever he said, I've got to finish, and he finished. Even though in the history books it shows as a DNF, did not finish, because actually his dad came out of the stands. So the reason I tell you this is, God has called us all directly to have impact in our life. He's called us all to run a race. One last story. I ran the half and I ran the mile in high school. Now this was the 880 and years ago before we went to the meters. And I was never fast enough to run the sprints. But I always loved watching the sprints. I still love watching the sprints today. And so let's take the 400-meter relay. And I'd always be out there in the track and watch the guys, and I'd always have the tape back there. And as soon as a guy coming off the curve, as soon as he crossed the threshold, the second guy would take off. So just at the right moment, while they were still in the pass lane, the guy carrying the stick would say, stick, left hand would go out. Right hand would go out, left hand goes back, they take that baton, and that guy shoots off to the next one. And they do that all the way around. And that's always stuck with me. A lot of times when I jog, it's really funny, is I'll just play like I'm taking a stick. I'll just like somebody called stick and I'll do it. Because it reminds me of when I was young and was watching that speed. Doesn't make me run any faster, makes me feel a little bit better though. The imagery I want to leave you with though is this. I believe in defining our impact, in defining our legacy. God calls us to run a race. I think we have some very defined opportunities in our life that if we don't maximize those opportunities, we don't finish. We get a DNF. But as we pass on, whether it's legacy, whether it's encouragement, whether it's values, however you want to define it, to whoever the next generation is, there's going to be a moment that we need to say stick, and they grab it and we hand it off. So I've kind of started you off with a process today of success. Going back to purpose and passion and impact. I think it's a great model. I think you can use it in your life. I think you can use it in your marriage. I think you can use it with your kids. I think you can use it at church. I think it's a great model for us all to run off of. But I really want to leave you with 4 specific words. The same 4 words that I believe that God called. He told Abraham, go, get up and get in the game. Leave where you currently are. Follow me to the Canaan I have planned for you, because that's where you can have impact. And the last word I want to add to it is stick and hand the baton.